I never considered myself a suspicious man. Paranoid husbands are for daytime talk shows. For those sad souls who snoop through phones, scroll through deleted texts, follow their wives in unmarked cars. That wasn't me. Sarah and I had been married for 8 years. We knew each other inside out, or so I thought. But that night at Lars and Emma's party, something shifted. It was a small get-together, the kind where people take off their shoes at the door and pile jackets on the bed. Their apartment sat on the edge of town, in one of those old brick buildings with creaky floors and too few parking spots. Cozy. Familiar. I could tell you where they kept the wine glasses without looking. The evening started like any other. Light conversation, soft indie music, the faint smell of something Lars had inevitably overcooked. I was in my usual spot by the drink table, playing the part of the quiet, reliable husband, beer in hand, smile just polite enough. And Sarah? She was everywhere. That's who she was. Magnetic. The kind of woman who could make a conversation about grocery shopping sound fascinating. Her red dress shimmered as she moved through the room, catching glances, drawing people in. And around her neck, resting against her collarbone, was the silver necklace I'd given her for her birthday last year. It was a small thing. A delicate chain with a tiny pendant. She'd cried when I gave it to her. Said it was perfect. That was a year ago. Felt like another life now. Back then, that necklace was a promise. Tonight, it felt like a question mark. As the night wore on, the crowd grew louder. Wine loosened tongues, music crept up in volume, and people clustered into corners for deeper conversations. I stayed near the drinks, half listening, watching Sarah more than I should have. She was in her element, laughing with a group by the window, her hand resting lightly on someone's arm. A guy I vaguely recognized from Lars' work. Too friendly. Too close. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. That is, until I heard him speak. Well, Sarah, you didn't really mind sneaking around last summer, did you? The words hit like a slap. It wasn't loud. Just a casual, offhand comment, said with a chuckle. But in that moment, it might as well have been a confession shouted through a megaphone. I froze. My breath hitched. Sarah's response came almost immediately, a laugh that didn't belong to her. It was sharp, brittle, like glass about to crack. Who says married women can't have fun? Laughter rippled through the group. Easy. Natural. Except for me. I wasn't laughing. My gaze locked on her face, searching for something: guilt, shame, even a flicker of regret. But she didn't look at me. Not once. She just kept talking, shifting the conversation to something safer. A new Netflix show. A mutual friend's vacation. The usual distractions. But I couldn't move on. That moment clung to me tighter than the ring on my finger. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was it a joke? A reference I didn't get? Some inside thing between coworkers? Or was it exactly what it sounded like? I wanted to believe the first option. Desperately. But the pit in my stomach had other ideas. I thought back to last summer. Sarah had taken on a new project at work, something that kept her late for weeks on end. I remembered how she'd come home tired, distracted, brushing off my questions with half smiles and quick kisses. At the time, I chalked it up to stress. We all get busy. No reason to worry. But now, in the warm glow of Lars and Emma's living room, that version of events felt naive. Stupid, even. I took a long sip of my drink, but it did nothing to steady me. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Conversations came and went. People laughed, joked, clinked glasses. But I wasn't there. Not really. I was trapped in that single, awful moment, replaying it over and over in my head. Didn't really mind sneaking around. Sarah, meanwhile, seemed oblivious. Or maybe she was just that good at pretending. She floated from group to group, her smile never slipping, her laugh perfectly timed. If she noticed my silence, she didn't show it. At one point, Emma came over, nudging my shoulder with a knowing grin. You look like you're plotting something, she teased. Deep thoughts. I forced a chuckle. Just tired. She didn't press. Why would she? To everyone else, Sarah and I were fine. Solid. The couple you wanted to be when you hit your 30s. But inside, something had cracked. I spent the rest of the evening on autopilot. Nodding at stories, refilling my drink more out of habit than thirst, all while my mind kept circling back to Sarah's words. Who says married women can't have fun? That was the moment I knew. Or at least, the moment I stopped being able to lie to myself. She hadn't slipped. That wasn't a careless joke. It was a crack in the mask. And for the first time, I saw the person behind it. When the night finally wound down, and people started gathering their coats, I watched Sarah say her goodbyes. She hugged Lars, kissed Emma's cheek, thanked them for a lovely evening. Her performance was flawless. As we stepped out into the cool night air, she looped her arm through mine, leaning into me like nothing had happened. "Good party, right?" she said, her breath visible in the chill. "Yeah," I replied, the word heavy in my mouth. She didn't notice the tension in my tone. Or maybe she did and just chose to ignore it. Either way, we walked to the car in silence, the only sound our footsteps crunching against gravel. In that silence, my mind screamed. I wanted to ask her, wanted to stop in the middle of that parking lot and demand answers. What happened last summer? What the hell did you mean back there? Is there someone else? But I didn't. Cowardice? Maybe. Or maybe it was something worse. The fear of hearing the truth. Because once the truth is out, you can't take it back. You can't pretend you didn't hear it. And in that moment, I wasn't ready for my world to fall apart. So I stayed silent. We drove home, the radio filling the space where conversation used to be. Sarah hummed along to a song she used to love. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the wheel, even as everything inside me was unraveling. When we got home, she kissed me goodnight as if nothing had changed. But everything had. That night, lying awake beside her, I stared at the ceiling and realized something devastating. The version of Sarah I loved, the version I thought I knew, that person might not exist anymore. Or worse, maybe she never did. The thing about suspicion is, once it takes root, it doesn't let go. It lingers, festers, grows into something bigger than you can control. After that night at Lars and Emma's, things should have gone back to normal. That's what Sarah expected, I think. The next morning, she was her usual self. Making coffee, scrolling through her phone, humming to herself in that same red dress she wore to the party. Like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't crossed some invisible line. But for me, something had shifted. Permanently. She handed me a cup of coffee, smiling like always, and asked if I had any plans for the day. Her voice was light, casual, effortless. But all I could hear was the echo of her words from the night before. Who says married women can't have fun? I sipped my coffee. Tasted bitter. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was off. Not just that night. Not just that moment. But everything leading up to it. The pieces started falling into place whether I wanted them to or not. It was little things at first. The way her phone was always face down on the table now. How she'd started taking it with her everywhere, kitchen, bathroom, even out to get the mail. It wasn't always like that. There was a time when her phone would sit forgotten on the couch for hours. Now it was practically glued to her. Then there were the late nights at work. First, they made sense. Deadlines, new projects, the usual grind. But then it became routine. Tuesdays, Thursdays, sometimes even weekends. Always with a perfectly reasonable excuse. A meeting ran long. A last-minute task. An important client who just had to be accommodated. But when she walked through the door on those nights, there was something different about her. A strange scent clinging to her clothes. Not her usual floral perfume, but something muskier, sharper, masculine. The kind of scent you don't pick up from a cramped office space. I remember asking her about it once, trying to keep my tone light, casual. She smiled, brushed it off with a laugh. "Oh, it's probably from a new shampoo," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Or maybe the guys at work. You know how those conference rooms get." It was such a practiced answer. Too smooth, too prepared. That's when I realized this wasn't new. She'd been rehearsing. The more I looked back, the clearer it became. The distance, the vague answers, the way she'd dodge personal questions with a quick kiss or a change of subject. At some point, Sarah had started building walls. Quiet, subtle ones. And I hadn't even noticed until they towered over me. Our conversations used to flow. We'd talk about everything. Our days, our dreams, even the stupid little details that didn't matter. But lately, those conversations felt edited, sanitized. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give me the same empty phrases. Busy but good. Nothing exciting. Just the usual. Every time she said it, it felt like a placeholder. Like she was keeping me at arm's length. I tried to convince myself it was just a rough patch. That every marriage had its lulls. But that excuse wore thin fast. Especially when the signs kept piling up. One night, She came home later than usual. Said she'd been at a team dinner. But when I checked our shared calendar, there was no mention of it. Sarah was meticulous about her calendar. Always had been. She lived by it. Appointments, meetings, even casual brunches with friends, everything went in there. Except this. I wanted to believe it was a simple oversight. A glitch. But deep down, I knew better. I started paying more attention. Quietly. Carefully. When she left her laptop unattended, I'd glance at her tabs. Nothing incriminating. Just work emails, spreadsheets, the occasional online shopping cart. But the real conversations, the ones that mattered, they weren't happening there. She was smart. Too smart for that. Her phone, on the other hand, was a fortress. Passwords, Face ID, even a new privacy screen that made it impossible to see anything from an angle. It was subtle, sure, but it was new. A precaution she never used to take. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But the silence between us grew heavier with each passing day. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, when I thought about confronting her. Sitting her down and just asking. Point blank. But every time I stopped myself. Fear, maybe? Or pride? Or the tiny, desperate hope that I was wrong. Because once you ask the question, there's no going back. So instead, I watched. I became hyper-aware of everything she did. The way she'd check her phone with a quick glance, fingers moving fast, locking the screen before I could see anything. The sudden errands that took longer than they should. The way she'd avoid eye contact when I asked simple questions. Where'd you go today? Oh, just errands. Which ones? Nothing important. You don't want to hear about grocery runs. Deflection. Always deflection. It was exhausting. This constant dance of pretending everything was fine while my gut screamed otherwise. I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. Like I was watching a version of Sarah that had been carefully curated just for me. The real Sarah was somewhere else. And the worst part? She didn't even seem guilty. If anything, she seemed content. Like she'd made peace with whatever she was hiding. One night, unable to sleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few months in my head. Every missed dinner, every late night, every forced smile. It was all there, plain as day. And I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. It wasn't just my imagination. This wasn't some midlife paranoia. Something was happening. Something real. And Sarah wasn't going to explain it unless I forced her to. But even then, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear her answer. Because deep down, a part of me already knew. And that scared me more than anything. The night everything unraveled wasn't stormy. It wasn't dramatic. No thunder, no rain beating against the windows. If anything, it was too quiet. Sarah had said she was flying to Los Angeles for work. A big presentation. High stakes, important clients, the usual story. She packed light, kissed me goodbye with a practiced smile, and told me not to worry. I didn't believe her. But I played my part. I wished her luck, carried her suitcase to the car, even watched as the Uber pulled away from our driveway. I stood there, waving like the devoted husband. From the outside, we probably looked perfect. But inside, I was bracing for impact. That night, the house was suffocatingly empty. Every shadow felt heavier. The clock on the wall seemed louder. I tried to distract myself, turned on the TV, scrolled through my phone, even attempted to read. But nothing stuck. My mind kept circling back to her. And then it happened. A buzz from my phone. Notification from the security app. Motion detected at the front door. I almost didn't check. Part of me knew what I'd find. But curiosity is a cruel master. I opened the app, watched as the camera feed loaded. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. The image flickered into view. Sarah standing at our front door. But she wasn't alone. Next to her was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed casually but too familiar. His hand rested on the small of her back. An asterisk mate. Possessive. Sarah looked up at him, laughing softly, and in that moment, the air left my lungs. She punched in the code, disarmed the alarm, and they both stepped inside. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. I watched the clip again. And again. Each replay digging deeper into my chest. There was no room for interpretation. No mental gymnastics to explain it away. This wasn't work. This wasn't an innocent visit. This was betrayal. Plain and simple. The worst part? She looked happy. I sat there, phone in hand, numb. My mind was racing, but my body wouldn't move. How long had this been going on? How many nights like this had there been? All those business trips, all those late meetings, were they all lies? I thought of our wedding vows. The promises we made. The life we'd built. And then I thought of that man's hand on her back. Felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. For the first time, the abstract fear became concrete. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. Irrefutable. Undeniable. A small, detached part of me wondered how she'd explain this. What lie she'd conjure up this time. A work emergency. A client visiting town unexpectedly? But no, even Sarah wasn't that bold. Not with video evidence. I stayed up the entire night watching the footage on a loop. My thoughts swung wildly. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak, disbelief. At one point, I caught myself laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. This was my life now. Watching my wife sneak into our home with another man. Recorded in crisp HD. By dawn, I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Bone-deep tired. When Sarah walked through the door the next morning, her suitcase in hand, it was like watching a stranger enter my home. She greeted me with a bright smile, her eyes sparkling as she asked how my night had been. Her performance was flawless. I didn't say much, just nodded. Let her talk. She rambled about the flight, the presentation, how exhausting business trips were. She even threw in a joke about hotel coffee tasting like burnt cardboard. I wondered if she rehearsed these monologues in the mirror. As she unpacked, I noticed little details. Her clothes neatly folded, not a single wrinkle. The same outfit from the night before. No boarding passes, no rental car receipts, just a perfectly curated lie. I wanted to confront her right then. Wanted to throw my phone on the table, play the video, watch her face crumble. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I watched. She poured herself a coffee, humming a song we used to love. Sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, acting like everything was fine. But for me, nothing was fine. Everything had changed. That evening, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat. The reality of it all sinking in, slowly suffocating me. This was real. Tangible. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being paranoid. She was cheating on me. And now there was no denying it. I thought back to the man in the video. His face was unfamiliar, but his presence wasn't. He carried himself like someone who belonged, like someone who had been there before. He knew the code to our building. He knew where the camera blind spots were. He was comfortable. That stung the most. The casualness of it all. For Sarah, this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was routine. I wondered how many times she'd done this. How many nights she told me she was somewhere else while she brought him into our home. The place where we built our life together. The place that was supposed to be safe. The betrayal cut deeper with every thought. And yet I stayed calm. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I needed to be sure. Methodical. This wasn't going to be an impulsive outburst. Sarah had been playing a long game. Now it was my turn. I started gathering evidence. Pulled security logs. Checked old footage. Cross-referenced her business trips with the app's history. The results were damning. This wasn't a one-time thing. There was a pattern. Dates, times, even a rhythm to it. I pieced together the timeline, every discovery adding another nail to the coffin of our marriage. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for clarity. By the time I finished, there was no more room for doubt. No more excuses. Sarah's betrayal was written in black and white, in timestamps and camera feeds. But I still hadn't confronted her. Not yet, because part of me wanted to see how far she'd go. How long she'd keep up the charade. I wanted to look her in the eye, hear her weave her stories, knowing full well they were lies. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about truth. Cold, hard truth. The next few days were a strange dance. Sarah continued her routine, smiles, small talk, the occasional kiss on the cheek. She even suggested a date night, as if trying to reinforce the illusion of normalcy. I played along. But inside I was counting down. There's a strange clarity that comes with betrayal. Once you accept it, it stops being chaotic. It becomes quiet, methodical, like watching the final act of a play you already know the ending to. Sarah thought she was in control. She had no idea the curtain was about to fall. The morning after watching Sarah walk a stranger through our front door on security camera footage, something inside me snapped. But it wasn't loud. It wasn't rage. It was a quiet snap. The kind that happens when something breaks so cleanly, you barely hear it. I looked at her that morning, sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone as if the last 8 years of our life weren't lying in pieces between us. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just nothing. When she looked up and smiled, it was automatic. A reflex, like breathing. "Morning," she said, bright and cheerful. "You're up early." I didn't answer right away. I was watching her. Really watching. Not the mask she wore for the world, but the person behind it. And the person behind it was no longer my wife. I gave her a nod. A bland, neutral nod. The kind you give a stranger in passing. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to acknowledge it. That was her thing now. Avoidance. She was good at it. The day went on like any other. Chores. Errands. Mundane conversations about grocery lists and weekend plans. Sarah filled the silence with her usual chatter, and I let her. Because for me, the silence had become easier than trying. That night, we sat down for dinner. She'd cooked my favorite chicken parmesan, heavy on the cheese, just the way I liked it. She even lit candles. Played our old playlist in the background. It should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like a eulogy. I watched her as she twirled spaghetti around her fork, telling me some story about a new project at work. Her hands moved animatedly, her smile wide, but her eyes never quite met mine. I realized then she was trying to play the part of the good wife, the caring partner. But it was mechanical, like muscle memory. And me? I was done playing along. I didn't respond to her stories. Didn't add my usual commentary. I just ate in silence, chewing through each bite like it was cardboard. When she noticed, she paused, her smile faltering for the briefest moment. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "I'm just tired," I lied. Another silence. Heavier this time. "You sure you're okay?" She pressed, tilting her head like she was genuinely concerned. I looked at her then. Really looked. "I'm fine," I said. "You?" The question hung between us, more loaded than she realized. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Guilt? Fear? Hard to tell. But she recovered quickly. "Of course," she said with that same smile. "Why wouldn't I be?" I wanted to laugh. But I didn't. That night in bed, she curled up beside me, resting her head on my shoulder like she always used to. Her breath was soft, steady. For a moment, it was almost easy to pretend. Almost. But that cold, hollow feeling didn't go away. I stared at the ceiling, my eyes tracing the same cracks in the plaster I'd seen 100 times. But tonight, they felt symbolic. Cracks. Everywhere. Sarah murmured something in her sleep, turning slightly. I didn't move. Didn't react. I wasn't part of this dance anymore. In the days that followed, things became scripted. Sarah would try. She'd suggest movie nights, bring up old memories, laugh a little louder than necessary. All transparent attempts to recreate what we used to have. But you can't rebuild something on a foundation of lies. And I wasn't interested in pretending. I became quieter. Detached. A ghost in my own home. She noticed. She had to. One evening she cornered me in the kitchen. Her hands were on her hips, frustration clear in her stance. "Okay, seriously. What's going on with you?" I rinsed my coffee mug, taking my time. "Nothing's going on," I said evenly. "That's crap," she snapped. "You've been distant. Cold. Like you're not even here." I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. For a moment, I considered telling her everything. The video. The proof. The late-night realizations. But I didn't. Not yet. "I guess I'm just tired of pretending," I said quietly. Her expression shifted, confusion, worry, maybe even a flash of fear. "Pretending what?" she asked, her voice softer now. "That everything's fine." The weight of my words seemed to hit her, but she didn't reply. She just stood there, chewing her bottom lip, her arms dropping to her sides. That was the first time she didn't have a ready-made excuse. After that, she tried harder. Cooking elaborate meals. Dressing up even if we weren't going anywhere. Texting me during the day with little heart emojis, asking about my meetings, wishing me luck on projects. It was all noise. The more she tried to pull me back in, the further I drifted away. I stopped asking how her day was. Stopped offering to help with groceries. Our conversations became transactional. "Do you need anything from the store?" "No." "Dinner at 7. "Okay." That was our rhythm now. At night, she'd climb into bed, inching closer to me, hoping for warmth. But I remained still. My side of the bed grew colder. A physical barrier between us. And yet, she kept trying. One night, she came home with tickets to a concert we'd always talked about attending. She presented them like a peace offering, her eyes searching mine for any sign of life. I thought it could be good for us, she said, her voice almost pleading. I looked at the tickets, then back at her. Maybe next time, I said flatly. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That was the first time she didn't try to argue. The emotional distance between us became tangible. A chasm neither of us could cross. Sarah kept up appearances, but her efforts grew more frantic. She laughed louder, touched me more, asked questions she didn't wait for answers to. It was desperation, pure and simple, but it was too late. You can't unring a bell. One night, as we sat in silence, her phone buzzed on the table. She grabbed it quickly, her eyes flickering with that familiar anxiety. She thought I wasn't paying attention. She was wrong. I watched her read the message, her fingers hovering uncertainly before she locked the screen and placed the phone face down. Again, I didn't say a word. The damage was done. That night, as we lay in bed, Sarah turned to me, her voice barely a whisper. Do you still love me? It was a simple question, one that should have been easy to answer, but it wasn't. I stared into the darkness, my throat tightening. I don't know, I said honestly. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, Sarah didn't try to fill it. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, mirroring my own sleepless nights. In that moment, I think she realized that whatever we had was slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Desperation has a particular look. It's subtle at first, small cracks in the mask, forced smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. But soon it becomes something more primal, a frantic energy, a constant scramble to regain control. That's where Sarah was now. She'd realized something was wrong. The emotional distance between us wasn't subtle anymore. It was a canyon, and like a drowning swimmer grasping for anything to stay afloat, she started to lash out. It began with small provocations. One morning, she picked a fight over the towels. I'd folded them wrong, apparently. A sin so grave it warranted a full-blown argument before I'd even finished my coffee. Seriously, how many times do I have to tell you? She snapped, holding up the offending towel like a piece of damning evidence. Edges in, not out. Is it really that hard? I stared at her, watching the way her hands trembled slightly, her eyes wide and expectant. She wanted me to react, to argue back, to give her some piece of the old dynamic, even if it was through conflict. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. Noted, I said simply, taking my mug and walking away. That infuriated her more than any shouting match could have. The next day, it was about my shoes by the door, then the trash not being taken out, then the way I left the toothpaste cap slightly unscrewed. Every day a new battleground. Every day the same result. Silence. My refusal to engage became a mirror she couldn't stand to look into. And so she changed tactics. The provocations turned to seduction. She started dressing up more around the house. Tight skirts, low-cut tops, the kind of outfits she hadn't worn in years. Not for me, anyway. She'd accidentally drop things in front of me, bending over just long enough to make a statement. She'd brush past me in the kitchen, her hand lingering on my arm, her perfume enveloping me. I didn't flinch, didn't respond. My body was there, but my mind was elsewhere. When I didn't react, she escalated. One evening, she came downstairs in lingerie. Not subtle, not casual. This was strategic. A carefully chosen set she knew I loved. Lace, deep crimson, delicate straps. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when she stepped in front of me. Do you remember this? She asked, her voice soft, sultry. I looked up from my phone, taking in the sight of her. Once this would have driven me wild. Once this would have been enough. But not now. Now it just looked like desperation. I remember, I said, setting my phone down. It used to mean something. Her smile faltered. Mark, she said, her tone shifting. What's happening to us? Fair question, but not one I was ready to answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't going to do the emotional labor for her anymore. You tell me? I said, standing up and walking past her. She didn't follow. In the following days, the emotional swings became more violent. One minute, She was making my favorite breakfast, singing along to old songs in the kitchen. The next, she was slamming doors, accusing me of being cold, distant, unfair. "I'm trying, Mark," she shouted one evening. "Can't you see that? Why are you doing this? Why are you punishing me?" Punishing her? That word hit differently. I wasn't punishing her. I was simply no longer pretending. But for her, that was the same thing. When her seduction failed, she returned to control. She started making plans without asking, booking us for dinner with friends, signing us up for events, acting like everything was fine. It was all about regaining the narrative. If she could get me back into the routine, maybe the illusion of normalcy would return. But I didn't play along. One night, she told me we had dinner reservations, a place we used to love. I made the reservation. 7:30. "You'll like it. It'll be good for us." I didn't look up from my laptop. "I've already eaten," I said. The silence that followed was heavy, palpable. When I finally glanced up, her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to scream, wanted to cry. Maybe both. But she didn't. Instead, she retreated. That night, she sat alone at the dining table, a bottle of wine by her side. She scrolled through her phone, probably looking for some distraction, someone else to fill the void I refused to patch up for her. But even that wouldn't save her now. The more indifferent I became, the harder she clung. The more she clung, the further she pushed me away. It was a cruel irony. One night, she cornered me again. This time, there was no pretense. No seduction. Just raw desperation. "Mark, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't know what to do. Just tell me. What's wrong? What did I do?" That was the moment. The line had been crossed. I could have ended it all right there. Pulled out my phone, shown her the video, laid out the evidence like a final verdict. But I didn't. Not yet. Because even in that moment, even in her so-called vulnerability, she wasn't asking the real question. She wasn't saying, "Did you see?" She wasn't saying, "Do you know?" She was saying, "What's wrong with you?" As if the problem was mine. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "You know exactly what's wrong," I said quietly. Her face drained of color. For a fleeting second, I saw it, the panic. The realization. She knew. Deep down, she knew I wasn't playing dumb anymore. But still, she didn't confess. Instead, she shifted gears once more. "I think we should go away for the weekend," she said, her voice shaky. "Just us. Somewhere quiet. We can talk. Reconnect." I admired her persistence. Truly. She was grasping at every possible rope, every last strategy in the playbook. But it was all too late. "You should take someone else," I said. Her breath hitched. "I don't want anyone else," she whispered. The weight of her words was supposed to move me. But they didn't. Not anymore. The reality was clear. I wasn't dealing with the woman I married. I was dealing with the version of her that came after. The version that thought deception could be smoothed over with effort, with candles and lingerie and half-truths. But some damage is irreversible. The following days were quieter. Sarah's outbursts lessened. Her attempts became more muted. It was as if she was beginning to understand that the battle was lost. That no amount of cooking, dressing up, or nostalgic playlists would fix what she had broken. Still, she lingered. Still, she tried. But the mask was slipping. And for the first time, I could see the cracks as clearly as I saw her. Sarah's desperation turned into something darker. It wasn't about fixing us anymore, it was about controlling the narrative. She started monitoring me, asking where I was going, who I was texting. The irony wasn't lost on me. The cheater worried about being cheated on. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch in a tight, revealing dress, her makeup done perfectly. The lights were dim, soft music playing. A scene straight out of a magazine. But it wasn't inviting. It was a performance. A last-ditch effort. "I made your favorite," she said. I didn't sit. I already ate. Her face crumbled. She followed me to the kitchen, her voice rising. "Why are you doing this? Why are you shutting me out?" Her tone wavered between anger and pleading. I turned to her, calm as ever. "Sarah, stop pretending. You know what you've done." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. That silence? It was louder than any confession. Her shoulders slumped, her mask slipping. That night, she cried herself to sleep beside me. But I didn't offer comfort. Not anymore. She had built this chasm. And now she was drowning in it alone. The following days were the same. She oscillated between cold accusations and pitiful apologies. Every attempt to spark a reaction failed. My indifference was her undoing. She'd prod, she'd provoke, but I gave her nothing. One night, as she stood in front of me, makeup streaked from tears, she whispered, "Please, Mark, I don't even know who I am without you. I believed her. That was the problem. She didn't know who she was. But I did. A liar. A woman who had gambled everything and lost.